Welcome to Municipal Affairs. After more than 20 years at the council table, last November marked the end of an era in the rural municipality of Meota, number 468 in the province of Saskatchewan. Longtime Reeve, Sherry Jimmy, decided it was time to hang up her political hat. As the first woman to hold her position in her community, she helped guide the RM through seasons of change, through seasons of challenges, and through seasons of growth. Now, with new leadership in place and 10 months since that last November election, we had the chance to sit down with Sherry earlier this month. In our one-on-one conversations, she shared her thoughts on the state of rural municipalities across the province of Saskatchewan, the pressures facing local governments today, and what lies ahead for communities like hers. We also talked about what it meant to be a trailblazer, the importance of local voices in shaping the future, and where the RM of Meota and rural Saskatchewan as a whole go from here. In the heart of every thriving community lies a well-crafted strategic plan. But crafting such a plan requires expertise, experience, and a deep understanding of local needs. Enter Strategic Steps, your partner in municipal strategic planning. Strategic Steps' team of experts have years of experience in municipal administration. At Strategic Steps, they just don't develop plans. They co-create homegrown strategies tailored to your unique community. They listen, they collaborate, they empower your community to thrive. Contact Strategic Steps today and take the first step towards a brighter future for your municipality. Call Strategic Steps at 780-416-9255 or visit strategicsteps.ca to get started. Sherry, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about yourself, talking about your career, and talking about advice that you would give the next generation of rural leaders here in Saskatchewan. I want to start, if you don't mind, by getting to know a little bit about you and your journey into municipal politics. What made you decide? Actually, I'm going to strike that first question. I'm going to ask it a different way. Because you were an elected official, so I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every other elected official who has ever been on the show. Where did your sense of duty to serve your community come from, Sherry?
I think my sense of duty has always related back to what can I do for my community versus what can my community do for me. I was born and raised in rural Saskatchewan, and that was our family motto. I come from a family that was always involved in community, and it seemed like a natural progression. When I left the family farm and the rural community, I moved to Saskatoon for university, but couldn't wait to get back into a smaller setting. And, many years ago, purchased property in the rural municipality of Meota in an organized hamlet, and quickly became part of the Hamlet Board, which is an advisory board to council. And then it was almost a natural stepping stone to move from being a Hamlet Advisory Board member to running for municipal council.
So why municipal council? What was it about saying, okay, I'm going to take that official step and run, put my name for it? Because off the record, before we started recording, and I'm assuming we're going to get into this, so I'm not breaking any news here, but prior to 2003, there had been no female ever elected in the RM of Meota. So that's a long and a very high ceiling to crash, but you crashed it. What was it about the municipal level of government that you said, okay, organizer to actual councillor?
I've always been intrigued by politics and municipal politics in particular because it's the closest level of politics to the people, really. And so I was enticed, I guess, to run for council by having served on an advisory board to council and in some ways faced some challenges. Being female in a male-dominated world at that time or sector at that time. Challenges with having the needs of an organized hamlet being fairly represented at a council table. And looking, at the diversity within a rural municipality and the challenge of how do you meet the diverse needs, not of so much as of individuals, but of the sectors within a rural municipality, which is very wide and geographically spread out.
Is that hard in a rural community to represent every single person? Because you're right. Urban communities, they're more centralized, so you know everyone. But in a rural setting, you could be 200 kilometers from your next door neighbor or 200 kilometers from one side of the RM to another. How did you see yourself in that role as counselor and then ultimately as Reeve in addressing the needs of everyone in the RM and not forgetting one part of the RM over another? Because I can imagine that's the challenge that most Reeves and counselors are dealing with right now.
Yeah. For me personally, it was a matter of identifying the sectors within a rural municipality in that broad, wide geographic base, and looking at it from a sectoral perspective. So, a sectoral perspective in this area might be, and was certainly in my former position, agricultural sector, and a strong history in that sense, an organized hamlet base, which encompassed and totally encircled two large lakes. And then most recently was the commercial sector, which with commercial resource development in oil and gas in particular. And so, in my mind, in my opinion, it was looking at the diverse needs of those three sectors. And yes, there's individuals and individual businesses within those sectors, but it was looking at it from a sectoral approach.
Is it hard to look at things through a macro lens when you're looking at people's lives, day-to-day lives, and how your decisions affect them?
People's day-to-day lives always come up when it affects them personally through taxation or through what I call a complaint-driven process, something very specific and targeted that is affecting their lives. And in responding to things like that, putting it into that macro lens as to, what's in the best interests of the whole of that sector, the whole of the RM. Because I learned very early in politics that you will never please everyone.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Stop the presses right now. I think we just broke some news here. Local council doesn't please everyone. What do you mean by that? Is is that the biggest challenge that a lot of councils fall into in the first few years, especially those who get elected and want to please everyone and want to help everyone? The reality is you just can't. You can't help every single person in the community because you just don't have the financial needs to do that. So when you first got elected back in 2003, what was the biggest obstacle that you had to learn yourself to ensure that you were a successful counselor and Reeve and local politician for your community?
I think the biggest thing that I had to realize was that I was elected to serve all of the people of the RM, not
Just your
my
district.
hamlet or my family or my business or whatever there would be. And I'm not sure about other municipalities, but even in this most recent election, people ran on platforms of helping a certain sector, whether it be the ag sector, the commercial sector, or the hamlet sector. And that was never my position. It was always, what's in the best interest of the RM as a whole, and how do we fairly represent each sector? And so that was a big learning thing. And that transcended down into really looking at what constitutes conflict of interest. When when are we as council dealing with matters that are really a conflict of interest when people feel they're only representing a certain group or a certain sector?
The role of council has dramatically changed over the last 5 years
Yes.
since COVID-19.
Yes.
Love it or hate it, it has changed the way that municipalities act. How has, from your perspective, since first being elected to when you retired in 2025, so 22 years, how has rural municipal governance changed?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned and witnessed has been the recognition that we need to work together. Saskatchewan rural municipalities are not like the Alberta county system. We are, forgive the word, but small little fiefdoms with a very limited tax base. And so we, being the closest level of government to the people, are always struggling with how to meet the needs of the most people and the sectoral needs with such a limited resource base. A limited resource base with people, a limited resource base with capital and infrastructure, and a limited funding resource base. Because at the end of the day, whether we're federal, provincial, or municipal, we're dealing with the same taxpayer.
Do you feel like you struck a right balance in ensuring that?
I feel that we were able to strike a right balance in working with our neighboring municipalities in a larger geographic area to meet a broader diverse needs of our ratepayers. So something that's unique in the rural municipality that I come from is the fact that many of the people around the lakes in the hamlets are not permanent residents, but they're taxpayers. They live and work in other areas. In some cases, they may only come to the lake because we call them weekend warriors, and have expectations of rural service or of urban services in a rural area. And so there's also the climate that, when people come to the lake, they're there for a holiday, even though they may be a ratepayer, and they can do what they want, and that there's no rules. So part of the balance was around bylaws and by consistent bylaw enforcement, whether you were a permanent resident or whether you were a weekend warrior, because people would come to the lake and decide that they're going to build a garage and get all the friends together with a few cases of beer. And then how do you deal with that? I'm getting the phone calls and it's 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. So one of the things that I'm really proud of in the RM of Meota that in 2016, we took a stand and said we need CSO services, we need bylaw enforcement. Why do we have all of these bylaws if we have no mechanism to enforce them? Because frankly, I was tired of going out prior to that with a tape measure and making sure when someone was building their garage that they were 4 feet from the property line.
Small town, while you are the closest, you deal with all the, and I don't want to say petty because it's very important to some people. We talk about the last 22 years as being a change in the governmental sector. The other area that I want to sort of get your opinion on, if you don't mind, is the downloading of responsibilities from the federal and the provincial government. Now, I'm going to ask you the political question. I know you're a retired politician, so you might not be used to these right now, but how did the provincial downloading affect the day-to-day services of the RM? Or did you see any that dramatically changed the way that the RM had to operate or take on responsibilities that were traditionally not in the municipal jurisdiction? Because we often hear the same line over and over again from federal politicians: stay in your lane, stay in the municipal lane, talk about infrastructure, don't talk about law and order, because that's the stuff that is provincial jurisdiction. You talk about the bylaw is in your jurisdiction, but if someone's driving down the street and hooting and hollering, noise complaint, understandable, but them driving down the street, weaving it inside out, that's not your jurisdiction, but you're dealing with it because people see it. They're calling you rather than their MLA or their MP. So what role did the municipality play in 2003 when you first got elected to 2025 when you retired that changed the way that the municipality had to operate in the jurisdictional lane that it's traditionally not in there?
I think the biggest change, maybe challenge, was recognizing that if the federal or provincial governments, laws weren't meeting our needs, then what could we do to meet them for the ratepayers that we were serving? So where
It's
were
not
the
like you can download it onto somebody else.
right?
Like, who are you going to download it to? The school board?
That's right, or to a Hamlet board.
Yeah.
And I have to say that sometimes there's a misunderstanding about the Hamlet boards and what you can delegate down to them, because they are only an advisory board. But yet, even at the municipal council level, it was like, well, let's just make that the responsibility of the Hamlet board, and then having to go back to legislation and saying, well, maybe we can delegate certain things, but we cannot delegate away our responsibility here. And we cannot delegate away our accountability to government and to the ratepayers on that. So we had to take a really strong look at, what could we do, either through our own bylaws or our own policies that would best meet the needs of the people. And that meant filling gaps that were of highest demand. So a good example would be policing. We went through a time frame, touch wood, that it was, we had a lot of break-ins and vandalism within our hamlet communities and resort villages in the municipality. And it became so severe that there was a little bit of what I call vigilante justice going on. And when I first got elected to Reeve, we had a culminating event. And I remember that the media had gotten involved, and my response to it, with the consent of my council, was to call a meeting of all of the leaders of that area. So within a rural municipality, you have towns, villages, resort villages, and First Nations. Every one of those entities is
organized hamlets as well.
Yes, but every one of those entities that I mentioned have their own government, whereas an organized hamlet has an advisory board. So one of the first orders of business I did was to convene a meeting of all of the elected officials that might have any remote interest in this culminating event. And what could we come together to do? And so we formed some joint task forces. We worked with the RCMP. We looked at CSO programming by law enforcement, and we came up with a community safety net model that would work for our area. And to this day, that group still exists, but it's a partnership. And it goes back to your question a few minutes ago about, what were some of the biggest lessons learned and how have I seen the biggest changes? It's the fact that we need to work together. We're not little fiefdoms and little silos out there. We have to work with our neighbors, because when an issue happens, it involves all of us, not just our little municipality or our town or our village or our First Nation. And that's a background that we haven't struck on, that I have. And I've worked for over 35 years with First Nation governments as a band manager, a co-manager, health director is where I started. And, trying to bring all of the interests of a geographic area together. And that has to include the First Nation interests as well.
Gonna pause here for a second. Gonna ask you a question. You can pause and tell me don't ask this question, but I need to ask it. You talk about the amount of the fiefdom of the challenges that we're facing right now. Now you're right. Crime doesn't stop at a border. It will go into a town. It will go into a hamlet. It will go into a First Nations. It will go into an RM. That means you have to work with every single partner around the table. The concern that some people may have is the table's already big enough. We need to shrink the table. We don't need 778 municipalities across Saskatchewan. We don't need 200 RMs. Are we too big for our britches right now in the rural municipalities and urban municipalities of Saskatchewan?
I would only say that we're too big for our britches in the sense that there are, in my humble opinion,
Yep. And again, this is my humble opinion as well.
Yeah.
This is just an honest conversation.
Right. In my humble opinion, I've always believed that there's too much government in Saskatchewan for just over 1 million people. We've got towns, villages, rural municipalities, 296 rural municipalities.
It was over 200. I just couldn't remember how many exactly it was.
So even from just a rural municipal perspective, there's so much to be gained from having a larger geographic base, a larger tax base, diversity that we can't attract or bring in to a small area. So my way of dealing with that, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Garcia report of the early 1990s.
Tell me all about it again.
Well, I haven't read it lately, but it was all about,
that nasty A word.
Well, or amalgamation, consolidation, yes. And, so we found other ways outside of the Garcia report and amalgamation and consolidation because that's such a big threat and swear word in Saskatchewan that where we have to work together. And so we've, formed, municipally owned corporations with multiple municipal partnerships. Yeah. And a good example is one that hasn't even hit the news yet, but it's called Northwest Community Safety Services. And I'm privileged to have been elected the vice chair of that organization. And it's 5 urban and rural municipalities in Northwest Saskatchewan that have come together for community safety, and with their own staffing model and their own governance model. And it's gotten the blessing, and I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, of the province for as a pilot project right now to see if we're sustainable. I believe in the sustainability of this project, and I believe that we can grow it. But, we haven't dealt with amalgamation or consolidation. We've worked around that by bringing partners with common interests together around a new governance structure where everybody puts part of their tax dollars into it, but we're able to do it on a regional level, not just a municipal level.
The best example of collaboration that turned into the consolidation / amalgamation is the RMF Corman Park, the municipality of Corman Park, right? The 4 rural municipalities, and I think there was a few towns as well in there, or villages, that amalgamated. I think it was the 70s. I could be wrong here. I just had the mayor, the former MLA Hargrave, on the show talking about it, but the RMs and the municipalities need to work together a little bit more. Collaboration needs to be a top of mind for a lot of municipalities. One-off organizations is great, but we need more one-off organizations, and we need to start doing that 4 years ago, not tomorrow. I want to talk about the future a little bit because you were there for 22 years. You saw the highs and the lows of rural municipal politics in Saskatchewan. What do you see as the biggest threat or challenge facing the rural municipalities in Saskatchewan today? Or in 5 years' time?
Well, I
Can I
think,
guess what it is? Is it
sure.
finances?
I would put it differently. I would say that we've got a limited tax base and go back to what I said previously about we are all dealing with the same taxpayer. Whether we're the federal government, the provincial government, or the municipal government. So, that tax base in Saskatchewan isn't growing through population increases substantially. We're seeing, I think, more economic spin-off with resource development, but we're also seeing a growing resistance to resource development from the First Nations side. So how do we look at, the treaty aspect of resource development and working with our First Nation partners and economic development ventures for the benefit of everyone in Saskatchewan?
I want to turn because I'm cautious of time, and I know you're a busy lady. You're retired, and you want to go back to being retired and not sitting in an
I'm
interview.
only retired from politics. I'm still working
There
full
you
time.
go. Okay. I want to talk about the elephant in the room. We talked about it at the beginning of the interview, but I want to dive into it a little bit more. Last week, I chatted with, last month, I should say, I chatted with a group of female Reeves in the province of Alberta. And they were talking about the role that women play in rural municipal politics. And one of them said, "There's a sense of it. It's as an old boys club, not taking away from anything that men bring to the table. I'm just saying
Mm.
that's the words that they used in Saskatchewan as the first female reeve of the RM of Meota, the first female counselor. Did you ever feel like it was an old boys club?"
Yes, I absolutely did, especially in the beginning, in the early 2000s. Um, I remember when I decided I was going to run and was asking people to nominate me, I wanted female nominators. And one of my ratepayers I approached, a lady a few years my senior, and I told her what I was wanting to do. And the response was, "Do you really think that that's a place for a woman at the council table?" And I said, yes, I absolutely do. And yes, I recognize that there could be some challenges there, but I feel that I'm up to that. And I feel that I have a different, maybe mindset and perspective that I can bring to the table. And I want to do this, and I would really like your support. And she did lend her name to that. And when I did retire from politics, she was one of the people that came up and acknowledged that that was the right decision to do, and she was happy that she had supported me at the time, even though she had her doubts on that. I have been part, just prior to retiring from politics, of the SARM, Saskatchewan Women in Rural Leadership Forum, which I think has been hugely successful in bringing together rural counselors and rural reeves who are female into, almost like a support group of their own. And I think part of that has been helping women such as myself determine what is a male female stereotype at the council table, what is truly, sexism there, and what is just politics. And rising above the things that might be a little bit sexist in nature to the fact that we're here to serve a diverse group of people.
Because at the end of the day, and I say this knowing that I'm the guy explaining this to a female reeve who has gotten higher in municipal politics than I ever have because I failed when I ran. But there's no female right way to fill a pothole, or there's no male right way to fill a pothole. Filling a pothole is a municipal issue, and it's not a gender issue, right?
Absolutely.
What's the advice that you give the next generation? Because the RMs have a staggered election. So next
Hmm.
October they're heading back to the polls. That next October, next November, I forget what exactly date, but
Hmm.
next year, 2026, they'll be heading back to the polls. What's your advice to the next generation of female leaders who are thinking about putting their name forward, like you did in 2003, who say, "Should I do it? I have the right to be there." They do. Everyone has the right to be at that table as long as they get elected. They have a legal right to be there.
Hmm.
What's your advice that you would give the next generation of leaders?
My advice is for, especially for even young ratepayers right now, is to find out what municipal governance is all about and get involved. Um, People need to be approached a lot of times, and they would like some mentorship, and feel nobody feels that they're qualified for running for municipal office. And they question, well, what can they bring to the table? And I think we need to encourage and support the confidence in the young people in this province to step up into these leadership roles. And we also need to encourage, and I dare I say the word, make it mandatory, that rural municipal leaders have mandatory training. I have developed and deliver governance training for the last number of years, at a First Nation level, and a little bit in the municipal side where I've been a keynote speaker at SARM conventions and things of that nature, because I'm a bit of a governance nerd. I believe that our strength relies in good governance structures and processes to get the outcomes that we need to see. And so we need to train people in governance. And one of the things I always say in my governance training as a preamble is there are two things in life that you will be called on to do that you will feel the least qualified for. And that is being a parent, and I say that from experience, and the other is being a leader in your community. So let's take advantage of the training opportunities to find out what this is all about, to be able to do the best job that we can. And there are some phenomenal training modules out there that are delivered in Saskatchewan, and we just need to make sure that people are connected to them and take advantage of them. And I am a firm believer in having mandatory training when you're elected to a municipal office.
Okay, so you heard the last interview I just did, and you know that if I say my last question before we wrap up, that opens up questions because you just said some things that I need to dive into, if you don't mind. What does good governance look like in 2025 for rural municipalities?
Good governance looks like accountability to the people, making
But how?
sound.
And I'm not trying to interrupt because
Mhm.
whenever someone says that, we harken back to that breaking news that you told on this show. You're never going to please 100% of people.
Right.
And in today's society where social media is dominant, accountability means nothing to some people, and accountability means everything to other people. And the word accountability is a very double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
What you think is accountable, I might disagree with. How do rural municipal leaders stay accountable in a very divided world in the context of good governance?
Okay. So, good governance and accountability mean saying what you're going to do and doing what you say,
Okay.
and evidencing that through, well, outcome measures. So if you're going to be investing $1 million in road construction, then what have you accomplished at the end of that time? Did you do it within the budget and the time frame that was projected? And going back to that communication and targeting your communication to to people so that they have accurate and timely information. And that's really tough in this social media world where people can put anything they want out there and it seems to be the gospel truth. So how do we counteract that with facts through our accountability? So good governance is accountability. It's saying what you're going to do and doing what you say. It's being accountable for the funds that are entrusted to you through the tax base. And there will always be people that will come to you saying, "What am I getting for my tax dollar?" and having an answer for that.
We are at the end of your career in politics unless you decide to run for the community that you've retired into in 3 years' time. I'm just putting that out there,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that the mayor is sitting right beside us as I say that. Does good governance mean the same to you now that it did in 2003 when you first got elected? Because the reason I ask that, and this is the big thing, being accountable for your words is great, is truly the thing that all municipal leaders should thrive for. But you have, and I have probably seen people come and go in municipal politics who say they're going to give you the world before they're elected. And the moment they get elected, it's, oh, I didn't know I could do this. Training is great. But there's an education portion of this that I want to ask before I let you go is, should we not be educating the people who are running for council today? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what a municipality actually does. There's a great book out there that's called Who's Driving the Grader by Ian McCormick.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically municipal leaders who have said, I'm going to direct the grader to plow that street. Well, no, that's not your job. Your job is the governance side of it. For you, has good governance changed you, or did you change good governance to fit to what you believe it is?
This may sound a bit arrogant, but I
love
believe
it.
that I've changed good governance to fit what I would consider to be models of good governance that I've acquired through two ways. One is the theory, the training that I've taken, the program through Johnson Shuyama that I've become designated as a municipal leader in, coupled with lived experience.
Yeah.
And that's what good governance is built on, is the theory and the practice, and bringing those two together and having some flexibility, because not every area is the same, but building your good governance on theory, practice, and how does that best meet the needs of the area that you're elected to serve.
Sherry, I don't want to take up much more of your time, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sitting down. Very spur of the moment for an interview. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for allowing me to ask questions that I don't often get to ask former politicians, but I appreciate you taking your time out of your day and coming over here and sitting down and chatting.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights into the world of rural Saskatchewan and local governments. Now, your support means the world to us, so if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, or if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button now. Your support means everything. Also, if you can, share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your communities, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we will be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs shortly. Till then, everyone.